right, welcome to the latest episode of 5 on the Floor. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick at 5 Reasons Sports. I got Eternal Bast. You can follow him at Eternal Bast. You can also catch his work on our playback channel as one of our lead hosts and on Off the Floor. So I should probably mention Off the Floor here. That's our Discord server, $2.99 per month. Link right here in the description. This is where you get access to 10 different channels plus our stage shows. This is exclusive content that you can't find anywhere else. Again, it's Off the Floor, our Discord server. We got moderators there, but we pretty much, well, I'll let Eternal tell you. We pretty much let you guys have your conversations. It's the most heat, the most information, and the most conversation. We're also sponsored by our friend Eric Rubenstein. You can find him at ericrubenstein.com, 877-829-ERIC. That's 877-829-3742. If you're injured in a car accident, this is the first person that you want to go to. He will get you your money. Raised in South Florida in the Lauderhill area. Went to St. Thomas University, graduated magna cum laude. Huge Miami Heat fan, has the most entertaining Instagram account of any attorney that you will ever find. I promise you that. Attorney Rubenstein. But again, the important thing is he's very good at his job and he will get you your money. So reach out to him, ericrubenstein.com, 877-829-ERIC. All right, the Miami Heat coming off a win against the Toronto Raptors in Toronto in overtime. A win that was in part possible because of the way Bam Adebayo took over in the overtime. Bam missed a shot late after passing on a three from the corner, but otherwise had another strong game, and he's had a string of strong games, Eternal, and that's what we want to get into here because it's been a conversation throughout the season about him taking some time to warm up. So let me go through his monthly numbers so far this year, okay? November, very short month, just 4 games, averaged 11 points, 7 rebounds. November, 17 points, 10 rebounds, and 5 assists. December, little under 17 points, 11 rebounds, 5 assists. Decent numbers, but not elite numbers. Then into January, I'm sorry, that was December. Into January, 15 points, 10 rebounds, 4 assists. But in February, and this kind of started with the last 2 games of January where he had a strong game against Orlando in a win and put up pretty decent numbers against Cleveland in a loss. But in February, we're now 7 games into February, he's averaging 22.4 points, 11.4 rebounds, 3.9 assists, shooting 54% from the field, 36% from 3, 76% from the line, and his defense has been better of late overall. Why? What's happening?
I just think, it's funny. You and I did a pod earlier in the season where it was like you needed Bam to step up as more of a leader, right? And this was before any of the Jimmy stuff was going on. Like, so none of the Jimmy trade stuff, none of it was happening. It was just like we were talking about Miami not being well tuned on the details, and it was more so on him and Spo as a coach and as the leader of the team to get the very important details down where they weren't really hustling for rebounds, they weren't really hustling for the 50-50 balls, and his defense wasn't as tight and all of that. And I think for whatever reason, he has shook that off. You see him being very, very vocal on the court, even on the sidelines as well. Even in his post-game interviews, pre-game, shoot around, stuff like that. You can definitely tell that he has taken on more ownership of the team and, kind of holding the torch, setting the bar rather. I think Bam just looks freer. Obviously John DeBlanca or some others will be like, well, the same shots are falling. Like they're just falling now. But he does look less hesitant on certain shots, right? Like he didn't look very stable when he was taking the 3-point shots. That's looked a little cleaner now, even though he didn't take the 3 for whatever God knows reason in the corner. But I'm gonna ask him about that when I see him. We're gonna have a talk, and we ain't talking a while. But I think Bam just looks freer. And I think obviously you can probably point to some of the Khalil stuff. I talked about him playing with Khalil and how he'll have more energy because he isn't required to bang a lot with the bigger guys. He's roaming a lot more. I mean, you can see him be way more active on defense in a playmaking kind of way than we have seen in years past. Going into the passing lanes, and it's all types of stuff weak side, and it has looked good.
Mhm.
Obviously, it hasn't been all of the result that you want it to be as far as like wins, but I think individually, Bam has looked different.
Well, I agree, and people are going to point to other factors. There's obviously the elephant in the room is that Jimmy Butler's not there anymore.
Right.
And we talked about the pressure that was on Bam during that situation. Now, I'm not gonna attribute all of his down play at times this year to that because
Right.
Jimmy did come into training camp trying to make an effort. I believe that, okay? And then we saw things deteriorate as we got into December and especially into January. So the early stuff for Bam, the late October stuff, the November stuff, it's not just a Jimmy thing, okay? And I know others are going to say, well, there was stuff going on in his personal life, which now I guess he and his partner are more free to talk about because we've heard more of that lately. And so everybody's speculating on various things that have been going on with him. And
Mm-hmm.
then there's the Ware insertion in the starting lineup instead of this kind of revolving door next to him, whether you call it the 4 or the 5 or whatever, Jovic, Highsmith, etc. Now he knows who he's playing with. And the offensive numbers with the two of them have not been great. We've documented that. The defensive numbers have been tremendous. I do think a lot of that is finding the right guys to play around them. But I do think there is something, at least of late, to the
Mm-hmm.
freedom of to when you talk about freedom to him as a captain and as kind of a torchbearer of this organization, not having to sort of deal with what was going on, okay, in
Right.
January, in early January. Because if you look in February, because if you look at his numbers in early February, I mean, he had some real clunkers. The Utah game, which was the one that really got everybody's attention, that of course was after all this stuff went down with Jimmy. That first game, January 4th, Bam had 4 points on 0 of 6 shooting. Then
Yeah.
he went 6 of 19 in the double overtime loss to Sacramento, which should have been a win. He was highly inefficient in that game. He came off of that and he had a 19, 15, 13, 10, 16, 6, 12, 11, 17. So he went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 consecutive games. That's between the 4th of January and the 25th of January
Mm-hmm.
without scoring 20. And since then, he has
Mm-hmm.
scored 21, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 out of 9 games. I mean, I don't think you can look at that. When you look at the Jimmy thing started to resolve, then he got traded. His play has picked up. And I do think for somebody who has more responsibilities than just playing, he has the off the court stuff. He
Mm-hmm.
has to some degree, help manage the locker room. You talked about leadership. I think that matters. And I feel like something has been lifted from him. The
Mm-hmm.
question I have now, though, Eternal, is we've seen Tyler's an all-star. Bam's obviously been happy for him. Okay. They've added Wiggins. We saw in this last game kind of what Andrew can provide. He had 25 points in this last game. He led the team in minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Are we past the point where we're going to be focusing on how often Bam is a primary offensive option? Because it has seemed lately like he's getting his points without them forcing it or without him forcing it. He's just being more decisive. There are pockets of the game that he kind of takes over like he did in the overtime last night. But I
Mm-hmm.
don't feel like they're forcing it as much. Got to go to Bam early or else he's going to be disengaged offensively. It feels like it's coming a little bit more naturally. Is that fair?
Yeah. No. Again, I think he's just been really active on the defensive end because he gets to fly around. Like he doesn't have to do so much and cover so much, especially with the defenders he got now. Like this is a dream. This is heaven for Bam. To have Davion, to have Andrew, to have Khalil on the backside. I think that really, plays into what makes Bam great. Is that you get to see more of his talent maximized on that end. On the offensive end, um, we haven't seen everything. There's still like some stuff that you still want to see from Bam, but it seems like, and I was just looking at this, the last 13 games, right? And that's specifically the first game we ever saw with him and Khalil. Bam has been averaging 19 points, 11 and a half rebounds, 3.9 assists, in the last 13 games. Now, if you take out so in San Antonio, that was 6 points, 11 rebounds. Portland, 12 points, 10 rebounds. Milwaukee, 11, 14. Brooklyn, 17, 16. Now, hear this. From Orlando down to Toronto, you have 26, 10, 21, 9, 30, 12, 23, 8, 18, 13, 18, 8, 22, 12, 27, 15, 19, 12. In those same games, Bam has not shot below, well, let's see, against the Boston game he did. He only shot below 50% one time. Mic muted. Your mic is muted.
No, you're right. It's just the one game, the 38%, and that's a good point. I mean, it's 62% against Toronto, 58% against OKC. You mentioned the Boston game, but 50% against Brooklyn, 50% against Philly, 59% against Chicago, 62% against San Antonio, 54% against Cleveland, 67% against Orlando. That's against all kinds of different bigs, all kinds of different teams. Here's the other part, though. It's not just that he's been efficient. He's getting the attempts to a consistent level.
Oh, yeah.
So you're looking at it 13, and I took overtime in this last game, but 13, 19, 17, 14, 16, 17, 21, 13, 15. And you say, well, he should always be 15 or above. That's always a marker that they've kind of put out there for him. And that was when Jimmy was there. So you would figure his shot attempts might go up a little bit. But he had games prior to that. The San Antonio game, he only shot 9 times. Like, yeah, he shot 33% on only 9 attempts. The Laker game, he only shot 7 times and made 3. The Utah game I mentioned, he shot 6 times. He's not had a single-digit shot game since, or even a game as low as 10 shot attempts since the Portland game on January 21st. So you're talking about increased volume, increased efficiency, increased rebounding. That's the other part of this. He has had double-digit rebounds, and he had a streak of 6 straight, including a 16 and a 14. Then he had a 9, and then a 12, and 8, a 13, and 8, and now in the last 3, he's had 12, 15, and 12. So he's producing in all those ways. He's also had a couple of big assist games. He had a 9-assist game against Orlando. He had a 9-assist game against San Antonio. He had a 3-block game against San Antonio. He really has not had a clunker, with the exception of, I guess, the Boston game from an efficiency standpoint, in a long, long time. Like, we're talking about essentially a month.
Right.
And this was a guy, like I said, who could not get into double figures into 20-point range over 11 straight. So when we come back, I want to get a little bit more into how they expand on this now, because now they have him at a level that we want to see. If he came out playing in this level at the beginning of the year, I'll let you answer. You know what? You can answer this inside the break. If he came out playing at this level at the start of the season, do you think things look different in terms of Jimmy Butler and where this team went? Because I feel that Bam's struggles early in the season may be caused in part by that, but maybe also may have exacerbated what was an uncomfortable situation where Jimmy didn't think that he had enough help. So we'll get to that in a second. Before we do, I want to mention another great sponsor of the 5 Reasons Sports Network, our friends over at Prize Picks. Use the code 5 FIVE. Put down $5. You get $50 to play right away. Prize Picks, the official fantasy partner of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. You can play every sport on there. Going out to watch Messi on Tuesday. I might make a play on him as well. You can also play NHL, MLB coming back soon. Of course, during football season, you've got the college and pro games there as well. But play across the sports spectrum, up to 6 players. Go to prizepicks.com, the Google Play Store, or the Apple App Store. We ask you to use the code 5 for 2 reasons. 1, they give you $50 right away. 2, it keeps this network afloat in a lot of ways. So go to prizepicks.com. Use the code 5. At the end of this episode, I had a chance to talk to Javier Iglesias of Real Estate Shop. We're going to put that on this particular episode. I did record that prior to the Toronto game, but still a lot of cool stuff that we did with Javier. All right, so let me ask you that. I asked you that question before the break. Do you think if Bam came out playing like this at the beginning of the season, that we might have had a different outcome in any way?
I think in some parts, I think they win some games they definitely should have won. I mean, this season here, man, like, they have dropped so many clutch games, and they have also dropped so many games where they had like a 13-plus lead. And if you get those type of games from Bam, you probably cut that in half or even more. Maybe it does quiet down a little bit of what was kind of rumbling with Jimmy. But that was, some of that. I don't know why you asked me that question. We've talked about this behind the scenes. We know who Jimmy didn't want to play backseat to. I'm not going to do that. That's a setup. I'm not doing that.
No,
But
I mean it's a reasonable question. No, look, it's pretty clear, and I'll take the lead on this. Okay, it it's pretty clear that by the end, Jimmy only had a couple allies in that locker room. Okay, um, Niko Jovic was clearly one, and if you talk to people around there, Terry Rozier was another. Beyond that, there wasn't a lot. Okay, that doesn't mean everybody wanted him out, but he did not have a lot of allies. The players, if you look at the players who, and I know some specifics about players specifically he didn't get along with, or who would have rather he moved on. Okay, I'm not saying Bam's that. I'm just saying Bam was in the most uncomfortable position
mm,
because your second year as a captain, a job you didn't run in the first place. You're struggling a little bit at the end of the year, so it's harder to kind of
mm,
assert yourself. It's not his natural way anyway. He is if you watch this documentary on the goal on the and I've started to on the gold medal Olympic team, there's a lot on Bam in the fourth episode, okay? And talking about how he's the one guy who goes and at every practice he comes, and he taps every guy on the shoulder, okay, beforehand. It's just who he is. He's just a gregarious, open, likable person. He's not necessarily somebody who wants to lay the hammer down. And this season was uncomfortable in that perspective. I think in any case, we've also talked about the fact that Bam had to do a lot of the stuff that the star of the team is supposed to do, not just the captain. Okay,
right.
because Jimmy didn't do that stuff. He didn't do a lot of the community stuff. He didn't do a lot of the media stuff. It all fell on Bam. And
Mhm,
so, and then you add to that the fact that Jimmy didn't want to be here, was making it clear, and people around Jimmy, those close to him, were constantly taking shots at Bam on social media and privately to reporters. You add all of that stuff up, I can understand why that would weigh on someone like him. With that being said, I think him not playing well early in the season also had an effect on making the situation worse because they lost more games than they would have. And I also think Jimmy felt he didn't have enough help. So I think all of this is together. So I guess I answered the question that I asked you, and I guess we could move on from there. But so where do you think this goes from here? Like, you want to put more on Bam's plate offensively now that you've got Ware cleaning up a lot of this stuff defensively?
I think he can. Be honest with you. I mean, if you look at it for a stretch, Bam was leading the team in scoring. In a lot of those games, he was the leading scorer, uh, ticking up towards 25 points per game. It's not surprising to me to see Bam finish out the season probably at 24 and 12. To be honest with you, his rebounding numbers have skyrocketed, and he probably rebounds a lot more, especially if the minutes stay consistent between him and Khalil. Khalil, when he does box out, he eats up space, and allows Bam to get those free rebounds. So I wouldn't be surprised if Bam, is scoring a lot more, and also too the way it lines up. When they do get the other units on the floor, the second units on the floor from the opposite team, then you just go to Bam being the backup center at that point. So now you're not playing who's starting. So then there's some matchup advantages for that. And so yeah, he looks refreshed as the season goes on.
All right. Well, we'll see where it goes. Again, if you're listening on the podcast feed, whether it's Apple Podcasts or Spotify, segment that I did with Javier Iglesias, check him out at realestateshopfl.com. If you're here on YouTube, make sure that you check out the post-game show. We're going to be on here on Sunday night after the Heat play against the Bucks. So the usual crew for that, and Eternal will be with the usual crew and some of us as well on playback.tv/5RSN. But we were hard on Bam earlier in the season, so we felt like we needed to devote some time to the way that he's played of late, which again, he would have been an all-star if he was playing like this, right?
Oh, yeah,
I mean, if he
absolutely, yeah.
right? I mean, he would have deserved to be on that team. So a little bit of motivation for next season and
It's
down the
good to see
stretch.
the
All right.
best player playing like the best player right now, though.
I knew that was coming. That's it. Join for more takes on Bam Adebayo and Tyler Hero. Check out playback.tv/5RSN. Thanks, Eternal. Appreciate it.